footprint. 4 times it just for the plastics being used. What I read in the packet today focused mainly, I'm delighted with all the stuff being done, by the way. Thank you for everything you're doing. But I'd like to see a little more focus on the non-local energy uses. And one of those is banning more single use or long time use, but still disposable plastic. And that some of that is through education, but a big piece of it could be not asking the city departments that are responsible for purchases not to purchase unnecessary plastics. I believe one of the unnecessary purchases is the equivalent of 42 million plastic straws or 3 million plastic bags to carpet El Camino Park with plastic carpeting for the sports use. And I understand the importance of sports. My kids were both in soccer. But I think we can do better using natural grass, and I would really like to see that we have a natural grass pilot project, partly for the carbon footprint of the plastics, but also because of the PFAS and microplastics that are being formed and running off of fields like that and exposing the kids that play there. So the concern about PFAS is really well-founded. The industrial engineer that reported in the city's turf study and way back in the last appendix said that the primary fiber in the Mayfield turf is PFAS fiber, and that's a big concern. So please make sure, well, do what you can to encourage other members on the council and other decision makers within the city to get that natural grass pilot going as soon as possible. It says 2027 in the Parks and Rec plan right now, and that's not soon enough in my estimation. Thanks very much.
Our final speaker is Magdalena C.
Hello, everyone. My name is Magdalena. I'm a Palo Alto resident, and I'm here to make comment on a topic dear to my heart, as several people already know. I want to urge this commission to ask the city council to follow through with their agreements to initiate and complete a natural grass playing field that will be well designed, well managed, and well maintained in order to show that natural grass is indeed as good and better than a plastic covered playing field or city park. Artificial turf creates heat islands in our city that contribute to the overall warming of the environment. As the Earth's warming accelerates, it behooves us to do all we can to minimize this warming effect, which is due to human activity. Not only will natural grass parks and playing fields keep life cooler here, we can also be proud that we are not using more plastic, which creates carbon in the extraction of the main component of plastic, petroleum, or in the production of the plastic turf, in the degradation of said turf during its short lifetime, and then on top of that, the disposing of the plastic when it is too worn to play on. By discontinuing the use of plastic turf, we decrease heat islands, we cause less deleterious health effects on children and citizens of all ages, we reduce the amount of non-recyclable garbage, which contributes to this committee's mission towards sustainability, and we send a vital message to surrounding cities that we here in Palo Alto walk our talk. We can lead by example. I'm hopeful that this committee might be able to move the effort of building the natural grass turf pilot project forward, which will address climate issues locally as well as health and sustainability concerns. The sooner this pilot study happens, the sooner we will have a clearer vision of what is possible and how this can impact future climate and sustainability considerations. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. That's you. Nice to see you both again.
Hey, thank you.
That concludes public comment on items not on the agenda.
All right, well, thank you to our public commenters. We appreciate you. We will move to staff comments.
Good afternoon, Chair Binker and committee members. Brad Eggleston, Director of Public Works. Just a couple updates from staff. So on our single family home electrification program, wanted to announce that the city soft launched the new Electrify My Home program a week ago, last Friday, actually. The Electrify My Home program adds a full service direct install electrification service for all home gas appliances. This was previously only available for water heaters. And we have 24 signups so far in the first week. The city's contractor, Franklin Energy, and its subcontractor Fuse will be providing fixed price services to help people with their home electrification projects. The city's rebate programs are still in place for those who want to hire their own contractors. While the program is out there now and available to everyone, staff has not widely marketed it yet. And we will wait a few months until the first projects have been completed, just to make sure processes are going smoothly before we get it out there more widely. And then wanted to announce the upcoming Earth Day Festival. So the third annual Palo Alto Earth Day Festival will be on Sunday, April 19th from 1 to 4 p.m. at the Palo Alto Art Center, specifically at the Sculpture Garden and Lawn area. The festival is an opportunity to learn about available resources for Palo Alto residents to make an impact and about ways to take climate action to support achieving the city's 80 by 30 SCAP plan goals. Some of the fun offerings will include special library story times, zero waste trivia games, seed bomb and packet making crafts, local youth sustainability networking, and we'll have Sequoia the bald eagle and Animal Control's gopher snake there to interact with as well.
And where again?
It's at the Palo Alto Art Center, Sculpture Garden and Lawn area.
Where it was last year.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that it? Okay. Well, thank you. That event, by my recollection, was overflowing last year. It was hugely attended. And so let's overflow it again this year. That's terrific. I have just a brief comment or two. Councilmember Lou, do you have anything to share?
I can go after you.
Oh,
Not much.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that as far as I know, the natural grass pilot project is moving forward, and even 2027, if that's FY 2027, starts July 1 of this year. So we'll check on that, but appreciate that. That certainly it's the intent to get that going as fast. There's growing seasons involved in things that you can't just start on the day you choose. You have to factor that in, but we will check. Just wanted, actually, I'm going to skip. I don't need to make a lot of comments. I will just say that the NCPA general manager search continues, and so we are making progress on that and moving forward as on schedule. So that's happening, and I think I'll just leave it at that. Councilmember Lou?
Yes, sorry, I needed a second since I was pulling up our work plan. It looks like funding and construction will be, construction will be completed in the 2027 to 2028 range. I think there's still some uncertainty there. So sorry, this is with regards to natural grass pilot. So reading from the work plan, in Q2, we will approve the plan for the natural grass and the funding, so the siting. And I think at Q2, we would have then likely a better estimate of the actual time frame and growing seasons. But this did make it into our sort of group 1 priorities. So the kinds of priorities that we would want and really push for completion on time, in contrast to our group 2 priorities, which are things that we need to track and we need to, we expect will mostly get done, but may need to be sacrificed to get those group 1 priorities like this natural grass pilot through the finish line. So we'll be tracking that. Otherwise, on Monday, we did endorse the Connect Bay Area Transit Measure, which will be an opportunity for BDA and a lifeline for many other transit agencies that we depend on.
All right, thank you. Well, good timing. Unless you have any report tonight, Councilmember Clerk?
I'm okay.
Okay. Well, perfect timing because we are now going to move to action item 1. I will note that I have a hard stop at 3:55. And action item 1 is review and discussion of the 2026-27 Climate Action Program goals and work plan timelines. So Director Eggleston?
Well, Chairman, before we jump into that, would you mind if I took a moment just to respond to the public comments we had about foodware?
I would be happy for you to
Okay.
do that.
Great. I just wanted to note that on Monday night, the city council did approve our upcoming 2-year work plan, the SCAP, both climate action and sustainability items. So just wanted to note, one of the items in there is S15, eliminate single-use disposable containers and reduce disposable foodware. And so the way that's described in the work we'll be doing says, assess compliance with existing foodware ordinance requirements, identify key challenges and barriers to reducing additional single-use disposals and to requiring reusable alternatives, develop new comprehensive plan to effectively expand and strengthen the foodware ordinance. So just wanted to share that is in our work plan.
That's great. And we can continue to adapt and evolve that. And there'll be opportunities for public comment as that moves through the process. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I had thought about that during that comment and forgot. So thank you for addressing that.
And with that, I'll turn it to Assistant Director Abendschein for the staff presentation.
Good afternoon, committee members. I'm Jonathan Abendschein, Assistant Director for Climate Action. Thank you for approving the 2026-2027 SCAP work plan on Monday. We're already hard at work on it. One piece of feedback we heard was that there was an interest in more specific program goals and timelines. We had some tentative things in mind in January, but they weren't well formed enough to share in detail yet. So that's what we're doing today. In general, you'll remember from Monday, our goals for 2026 and 2027 are to introduce more services in the multifamily and non-residential sectors based on the studies we did in the last few years. Pilot cost-efficient program designs in all sectors, ideally with a focus on financing and repayment assistance over upfront incentives, and then develop a range of actionable policy options as far as the pace and timeline for community-wide electrification. I won't spend too much time on these slides, but I'm happy to answer in detail any of the information that's on them. Next slide, please. So in the single family area, we have a robust set of programs already, especially with the recent launch of our full service program. And the focus in 2026 and 2027 is piloting cost-efficient programs, a heavy focus on financing, and trying to adapt our program to changing conditions such as the air district regulations coming into effect around water heaters. The program goals do account for those regulations. And we do have some ambitious goals. Around financing as well, which are pretty ambitious, but I think we need to move towards that sort of level of adoption to meet our goals. One thing I do want to note about the 2027 goals is that this is the rate we want to be at by around Q4 2027. This is not necessarily what we're going to achieve from now through 2027 annually, but that's the annual rate we want to reach by Q4 2027. Next slide, please. In the multifamily area, our focus has been on EV charging so far. We've had a lot of success. Over 10% of units in Palo Alto are in buildings where we've helped install a shared EV charger. We want to enhance this program with a range of solutions, ranging from mobility hubs to on-street charging to on-site individual chargers in complexes where there's high EV adoption. And we want to achieve some success with financing over incentives in this area. In addition, we want to start pushing into building electrification in this sector after having completed studies. We'll be continuing our affordable housing multifamily grant program. These projects do take time, but it will electrify a sizable fraction of dedicated affordable housing. And we also want to give some resources to landlords and condo associations in market rate buildings as well. Next slide, please. In the non-residential sector, we want to translate experience from our packaged HVAC pilot into an advanced program. But we also want to get some experience working with commercial water heating and boilers, both for domestic hot water and hydronic heating systems. And we do have some projects in progress already on all those fronts. We have had some success working with the city, PAUSD, and the hospital on electrification, but we would really like to work with a private for-profit major employer in Palo Alto and find financing approaches that work for these major commercial campuses and also for smaller commercial real estate owners. Next slide, please. We completed most of our study work in the 2023-2025 SCAV work plan, so less focus on that in this cycle, but we still have some important work to do. I talked about this effort to develop actionable policy options for council on the pace and funding for community-wide electrification. That's encompassed in CA 13, 14, and 16. We also want to bring some policy options for carbon neutrality, and we want to finish the gas transition study and continue grid modernization at an appropriate pace using grid cost-efficient strategies. Next slide, please. A big focus in the mobility area will be active transportation, especially enhancing the city's bike infrastructure and improving safety, but also looking at other last mile solutions like micro mobility and continuing to help transit operations through traffic signal management. And we're going to continue work on electrifying the city's vehicle fleet and buildings with a pilot city facility electrification plan poised to have a big impact. Next slide. And we've reviewed these goals and timelines with the working group on Wednesday. I think there was general support and acceptance. Conversations included questions about how these goals would be incorporated into the budgets, which is a little bit out of scope. But we gave a little background on how these would be factored in, how the single family goals were developed, and some discussion of mobility goals and building performance standards. There was also some interest. I think the program goals were viewed as a positive step, but I think there was a real interest in dashboards that would track progress towards these goals, looking at the entire building stock, which is something we're working on. So hoping to bring that to you later this year. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I think I'm going to go to public comment first so we can take that into account in our committee discussion. So, Madam Clerk, do we have any public commenters, or if there's anyone in the room that'd like to speak?
We do. We currently have 2 requests to speak. Our first speaker is Miriam G.
Hello again, Miriam Gordon, reuse director of the Story of Stuff project. I just wanted to address the goals overall of the city's climate action plan and note that in its focus on transportation and the built environment, that the plan fails to address consumption-based emissions. These are the emissions related to consumption of products within a city. By failing to include them, the city is ignoring a big area of climate impact. In today's throwaway economy, that has significantly contributed to a 90% increase in global carbon emissions since 1970. How we package, use, and dispose of products can have major implications for greenhouse gas emissions. And since you have already committed to this policy through subject area, I won't go into lots of detail, but I would just say that there are many cities that are addressing consumption-based emissions in their climate plans, including San Francisco, which focuses on reducing emissions through sustainable consumption alongside energy efficiency. The climate action plan includes a comprehensive plan targeting a 15% reduction in total waste generation and a 50% reduction in landfill disposal by 2030, and transitioning to reuse in food service is part of that plan. Other cities are doing this, including Denver, Minneapolis, Eugene, Oregon, and Vancouver, British Columbia. So just wanted to note that if you're interested in looking at how to incorporate consumption-based emissions in climate action plans, the U.S. Sustainability Directors Network has a sustainable consumption toolkit that outlines consumption-based emissions reduction strategies. So too does the West Coast Climate and Materials Management Forum, which has a consumption work group. I'd be happy to forward these resources and appreciate your opportunity for public comment. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Stephen R.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Rosenblum. I live.
Stephen, we cannot hear you.
Sorry, I unmuted.
Sorry, Stephen, I can see that you're trying to speak, but your microphone is not coming through.
Okay, well,
We can move to the next comment and come back to Stephen. Our next request to speak is Claire E.
Thank you. This is very brief. I just have already mentioned that I've learned on the city, oh, again, I'm Claire Elliott, Palo Alto resident. I learned on the city's webpage, sustainability, and underneath that zero waste, about 42% of our carbon emissions coming from our manufacturer stuff. Just like Miriam was just discussing. The fact that I have been in the environmental field for decades, and I just learned that a few days ago by going down in the website, and it's not like prevalent. I'm even a zero waste block leader, not a very effective one, to be honest. I'm loaning out the party pack fairly regularly, but I would love to see that data more, that factoid up there higher on the
1, 2,
city's
3, 4.
website, so people understand that. Because when we make our choices for what we purchase, it makes a big difference. The other thing I just want some clarification on, I don't know if it'll come up and if you have a chance to address it. I'm confused about the climate action plan and the sustainability part of the SCAP, because I saw it by watching previous meetings, presentations on stormwater, and then different items related to biodiversity, the number of native plants installed in the city, but I'm not hearing anything in the plan for 26, 27, and I don't understand where that belongs, if it's still within this committee. That's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
We can return to Stephen. Stephen, would you like to try speaking again? You should now be able to unmute yourself.
yeah, can you hear me now?
Sorry, Stephen, it's still not coming through.
Yeah.
If you would like to submit your comments by email, we can make sure that the committee and the city council receive them. And that concludes public comment for item 1.
All right, thank you very much. Does staff want to respond to why we're not seeing sustainability in today's package? Just so that I don't. Okay.
Yeah, today's meeting specifically focused on climate action. So both sustainability and climate action were addressed on Monday. And I do think that the timelines for sustainability were a little more defined by the time we brought it for adoption on Monday. So this is really kind of a supplement that's just focused on the climate. But sustainability still is a part of what we talk with this committee about over the year.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that's still part of the plan. It's just we're focusing today on the climate part of it. So they're not dropped. Thank you. Colleagues, questions, comments?
Go first, George.
Sure. I only have brief comments on this item. I really appreciate the metric goals. They're well thought out. I think they are, for the most part, pretty reasonably aggressive compared to 2025 similar goals. There are a few areas where arguably some metrics could still be attached. I guess I'm curious, how does the actual tracking process for these metrics work? Is it possible to get a mid-year check-in? What does the overhead look like? Yeah, can you just give some color there?
We actually track a lot of these metrics fairly regularly just for program operation. It does take some work to bring them into a dashboard format, but we're working on pulling something together that we can bring to you periodically over the course of this year to track more than we have in the past.
Okay, great. So that thread from the working group about getting a dashboard will actually land. Great. Yeah, I think those are substantively my comments. I appreciate the work and I appreciate the variety of goals that we're going through. And hope that since we will have an actual baseline for our 2027 goals, we can make our next set of goals for 2028 more aggressive or sort of more calibrated. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So first, we had in our last council meeting, and this is item number 9, and I was trying to correlate the table of what included SCAP sustainability actions with what we have today, but even when I tried to filter out the things that are sustainability, I couldn't track. So you may not have this available. This is from our packet on Monday. And after C8, it started listing E1 through 7, a whole bunch of E's. And then I couldn't find E's here in today's packet. Can you explain what the E's are?
I'll ask our sustainability manager to remind me which one is. Oh, okay. Yes, so, and I'll bring this up, I can give you your computer back here in a moment, but the E's are, so we have the goals and key actions, which are the very high level efforts that we're doing over the entire, they have a 10 to 15 year time horizon. And then the work plans have more specific goals on a shorter timeline. Now, what we've done in the past, and I don't think we've done it for this work plan, is made a matrix tying each of the work plan items back to the goals and key actions. And we did do that. That's what you're seeing in attachment G in the council agenda. Do you have it?
That's what I have open.
Yep.
I'm not.
And so down the right side, you should be able to see all the CAs and which E they tie to. So E is energy, and then we have EV and also M for mobility in the goals and key actions.
Okay, so on the left column, there is the key action.
Yep.
And then the right correlates to what we have today.
You got it.
Okay. So, and I haven't tracked it to what we have today, but for instance, we had under an E, reduced natural gas use at city facilities. And then had CA9 under that, which is develop a commercial electrification as a service. And so there were a number of things like that I just didn't seem to be categorized correctly, that they look like good work plan items, but I don't know on the as I went through them, I found a number of those, and I don't want to belabor them in this meeting, but I just want to see if we can have a follow-up to kind of go through these in more detail.
Yeah, if you give me a couple examples of places you're seeing issues, either now or by email, we can do a review and make sure that everything's lined up the way it needs to be lined up and send an update to the committee.
And then next, I wanted to follow up on what George brought up on the metrics. So where do we really see the metrics that we're going to be utilizing?
Well, if we can maybe put the slide.
Some of it's under, I see goals seem to have some metrics embedded, and basically that the metric is the goal in the way it's framed, if I'm seeing that correctly.
Yes, we're looking at the metrics. I mean, obviously there are higher level metrics that sort of derive from these goals, like emissions reduction, but generally what you're seeing, those are that's what we're holding ourselves to. That's what those are the numerical goals we're trying to achieve. And again, it's the rate of adoption, the annual rate of adoption we're trying to achieve.
So in that third column, you're basically using goal as the column for metrics.
Yes, and I mean, these words I think get used differently in different contexts. If you can surface for me what you see as the difference between metrics and goals. Maybe I can point you to where the metric piece is that maybe covers what you're looking at.
I can do this as a follow-on.
Okay.
And some of it really is simply how framing an objective versus the measurement for that objective.
Yes, and I think the word that we're using there is timelines for the timeline on which we want to achieve the objective, and then goals when there's an appropriate numerical target that we're trying to achieve. That's what we're terming goals, and so that might align. Timelines might be aligned to goals in the way you're thinking about it, and goals are aligned to metrics, which might clarify it.
Actually, the timing is a third dimension.
Okay,
So we can,
all right,
yeah.
we can talk about it.
So then I did want to address the issue of that Miriam Gordon brought up around basically primarily about scope 3 emissions, which we've had discussions over the last couple of years on at what point in time do we begin to go beyond the scope 2 and scope 3. I think one of the things that, as I look at it, is we should probably have a good refresher on really what is included in the methodology we use for our GHG emissions versus what is outside of that, and primarily, as I understand, in scope 3 emissions, although some of the I'm not sure that they track perfectly between us being wholly scope 2 and what's in scope 3. But we have our low carbon concrete initiative. We have a lot of zero waste initiatives. And so we have some elements that certainly go beyond the way that we're measuring GHGs and are part of that next dimension. And I think we all recognize that leaping into a quantitative goal and measurement of that is even more complex, even beyond what most cities are doing. But as we've heard, it is emerging as a real next and kind of the final direction, that there are NGOs and cities that have taken the steps. So I'd like to see us at a minimum come back here with an agenda item where we're looking at those points of reference and understanding what would it entail, what might we bite off as the first bite of the apple versus leaping in and going beyond what our current capacity might be, but to move from recognizing it's out there and that we're doing some things that correlate to it to actually begin a serious discussion. Brad.
Well, I do just want to make the point, and we've had some brief discussions about this over a couple of years. I don't think it's part of the SCAP, or at least currently the description of the ad hoc committee's purpose. It's not in.
So
this time.
What it is the question of what would be the next dimension of the SCAP. So it's certainly not outside of SCAP in principle. And if this committee is only formed to review basically the implementation of the initiatives that the council has adopted, then that kind of leaves like a colleague's memo or something like that is the only way to initiate even a discussion on this. One of the good things about this committee is we could have prelim discussions and not have to, address this at a council meeting before we've really flushed anything out and begin to understand this. So
Yeah, and I don't mean to say that there's no way that it could come forward as a topic. I just wanted to bring that out because I think at least as last year's purpose statement for the committee, I believe that would have been the case. The other thing to point out is that I think on your council agenda Monday night is the council priority objectives and committee purpose
point.
statements.
Yeah, so I think that may give us an opportunity to work it into an existing agenda item. And maybe what we can do is just see if there's council direction to begin to explore the topic. Okay. I had one question on the multifamily. And that is, to what extent are we including, I'm trying to remember where I read it, but there's different support for technical support for multifamily. The whole kind of approaches whereby a multifamily project might not have to do a panel upgrade and a larger pole. Is that part of what we're providing technical advice on?
Yes, when we look at EV projects right now, we do talk about that. If we're running into panel issues, and that is something that the utility can accommodate. But it goes beyond that. Right now, we do have technical assistance for our non-residential customers, and so there is already some level of technical assistance that's provided for central systems in multifamily buildings, and we do have single-family incentives that landlords could use for in-unit upgrades. But there are just special issues that people deal with in the management of multifamily buildings. It's different from non-residential, that's different from single family. And so having someone who can speak to those specific challenges with landlords and condo associations is what we're really trying to do there.
And you said EVs, but I was really meaning whether it's triggered by EV charging or building electrification.
Well, and what I'm saying is we've mostly been focused on EVs, and we have done it with EVs, and now we'll start, as we start to push into building electrification, we'll do it with that as well.
Thank you. Good.
All right, thank you. Just picking up preliminarily on the consumption goals. Yes, I think that, the way we explored some topics at the end of last year to prep for this year, it would be nice if there was some mechanism we could do that to just to talk about whether, to what extent and whether and to what extent we would look at consumption goals with respect to scope 3 emissions. But just like you mentioned the tableware, what do we call it? The utensils fits into sort of the sustainability piece. Seems that we could also look at it more broadly from that standpoint. Do you think? So, for example, when things go into landfills, single-use things, there's leaching issues. There's various ways. So I think we could deal with this under a couple of categories. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that in terms of the consumption goals for reducing packaging, and single-use items.
Yes, I'm definitely for single-use items. There are those implications. I guess there would be a difference between what discussing with respect to one item versus the ideas of establishing overall consumption-based goals and inventories and those sorts of things.
Right. And so that's why, but we could start at it, but then I do agree that it would be nice to look at it more broadly and figure out how it fits into our overall plan if we some kind of mechanism. If we could explore that in parallel with executing the current plan, that would be good. I wanted to ask about, we have the detailed appendices on CA1 and 2, but I wanted to go to the non-residential programs. So I think there's some opportunities there to make some progress. And you mentioned the CA12, the partnerships with large commercial facility owners, and that's nice to see Q4 2026 or earlier. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what has been done so far to seek a large commercial partner, and if council or others could be helpful to you on that.
So the utility has its key account representative program. And they do have relationships with both the facility and sustainability managers for the about 60 large key account customers.
Is it 60?
About 60. Yeah, it fluctuates. And we have had very productive engagements with sustainability managers. But the pandemic really did put a crimp in the appetite for these projects temporarily, at least. I think the interest was still there, but it was a little tough to move forward on projects. So we need to revitalize those relationships. There have certainly been changes in people in different places and changes in corporate goals, and so we need to sort of reassess and find the partner who's going to be interested in working with us. And as we start to define where we're headed with this, we can provide updates through the staff update section in case there are opportunities where a connection would be helpful.
No, that's great. And so these things like rooftop HVACs, those kinds of things, because I'm wondering, well, let me just stop there. I'll ask the next question.
Sorry.
And what all are
That's the
you,
question. Oh, about the HVAC program?
what all are you going to be asking them about, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, so I think what we're going to be looking at, and again, we're still defining this program a little bit, but again, what we're going to want to look at is what sorts of equipment, what sorts of gas equipment is nearing end of life? What are their corporate sustainability goals? What sorts of assistance is helpful in helping them, decide to commit to those sorts of projects? And we do have a third party program consultant that provides technical assistance, who has gradually been expanding over the last few years their capabilities from efficiency to electrification. And so we do have that resource to lean on as well.
That's great. Because it would be interesting with talk about building performance standards if there was almost a de facto pilot or two. We don't have to call it that, but some early partners that would try with existing buildings as opposed to the new buildings that they may own or operate, to see if they could get, retrofit some of the things and do the things you're talking about. Because it would give us some information if we were to consider some kind of EPS ordinance or something. It would be nice to see
Yes.
what's realistic, what the timeline would be, what kinds of changes they could make, which ones give them more trouble, which ones are more amenable to.
No, that's exactly the kind of information we're looking for. And these are large campuses, so there'll be a range of equipment, anything from packaged HVAC units to hydronic heating systems, the boilers, and the challenges of dealing with those is something that we want to get familiar with. And then smaller commercial water heaters will be out there as well. So I think that's the value of working with these larger campuses. You get a sense of the diversity of equipment they're dealing with and how they operate.
Yeah, no, that's great because it is complicated from that way. And like I said, they're almost de facto pilots. And if we got some data from that, we could decide what might make sense to ask them to do more uniformly across the city.
Yes, that's exactly
just-
the intent.
Great. So we just started and put out some rules. There would be some digestion problems, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to learn from this. Okay, that's terrific, and I see that starting right away. And then could you tell us just a little bit more about CA9, the electrification as a service or similar financing pilot? Because I know we talked about that at our tabletops in December, and I think that's what's informing this. But could you tell us a little more about what's planned there?
So some of the, as you saw at the workshop in December, some of the basic concepts around electrification as a service or 0% financing or other sorts of financing programs, the outlines are there, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done around what administration would be required, what sorts of terms are acceptable, and how to pilot something like this in as simple a fashion as possible so that you actually learn what's going to happen, but you don't get tied into a a 30-year program if it's only ends up working for a few people. So that's what we're working on actively right now, talking internally. And when we have more to share, we'll come back with an update.
Well, I really appreciate that because I think trying to sort out this puzzle, the financing side of things, is going to be sort of a critical gating item to making the progress we really want to make on electrification generally. So whether it's non-residential or residential, I think that's a critical thing. So thank you. I think that's all that I have. So anything more from either of you? Councilmember Root?
I'm just trying to think through, how some of the other directions we're taking fit in with the goals. One that, the chair was kind of alluding to on, really, how are these programs funded? And one of the things that had been discussed at the workshop and elsewhere is going forward. First, what's the best way to utilize the dollar resources we have? And there was an emphasis on lower income being where we want to put a disproportionate approach there. But then if we don't have enough dollars, in what circumstances and what degrees and in what timing might we incorporate mandatory programs? And how does that fit within our goals and work plan?
So CA 14 is focused on regulatory measures, and we will be coming to you in April for a discussion on the types of things we're seeing out there as potential opportunities, and get feedback from you on the types of things you really would like us to be focused on exploring and what you might prefer for us not to be.
So CA 14 is very broad then.
It's very broad.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'll be April will be a little bit of a scoping discussion, and then we'll have to work out the resources and timelines for what we specifically explore, because some of these regulatory approaches are more complex than others.
Okay, thanks. And undoubtedly, it's going to be quite a challenge.
Yes, but glad we're exploring it. So that's great. Okay, well then we'll close up action item 1 and move on to action item 2, which is our grid modernization update. So who is up for that? Mr. Crowley. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. So much up there. So I'm Terry Crowley, the Chief Operating Officer for the Utilities Department, and have a presentation on grid modernization and an update on our progress and where we're headed. This presentation was provided to the UAC in January and also was provided earlier this week to the Climate Action Working Group. Next slide, please. So grid modernization, just as a background, project is replacing electric utility facilities to improve system reliability while preparing to meet demands for electrification. As we look at historical residential dwellings and their peak demand, it's generally between 1 to 2 kilowatts. Under electrification, these peak demands could increase to a range between 8.5 to 19.5. So to kind of convert that into amps, just for relevance, it's about 35 amps to 80 amps on the residential service. Fiscal year 2025, Grid Mod completed a pilot area, increasing capacity to roughly 900 homes. Cost to complete that pilot area was roughly $10 million, or about $11,000 per dwelling. Future work that we're going to focus on is reconstructing legacy equipment, so 4 kV system, upgrading sub-transmission capacity, strengthening feeder ties between substation, and modernizing the Colorado substation. Next slide, please. So again, talking a little bit more in detail and providing some magnitude of cost for these projects. So one of the key projects that we're going to work on early is to reconduct roughly 3 miles of overhead 60 kV sub-transmission line. This is the transmission loop that surrounds the city and supplies power to all the individual substations. We're estimating that at roughly $4.6 million. We're looking to convert the 4 kV distribution system to 12 kV. 4 kV is a legacy system for the city. 12 kV is the the bulk of the system today, but there's two stations and two areas of town that are still served to by 4 kV. That's roughly 32 million. Looking to reconstruct 4 of the 12 kV substations, which is East Meadow, Hopkins, Adobe Creek, and Colorado. Rough cost for those 4 substations in total would be 96 million. Reconstruction of the 115 kV and 60 kV components of the Colorado substation. That Colorado substation is a receiving station for the city, the single source of transmission for the city. Roughly $41 million there. Upgrade existing 12 kV distribution systems. This is the entire 12 kV distribution system, upgrading pole chop transformers, pad mounted transformers, secondary systems, so that all homes, all residents within Palo Alto would be able to electrify and have that capacity outside their home to do so. That's 244 million, so that's the largest portion of the project. And then strengthening 12 kV feeder ties between substations to improve reliability and capacity. So improving the capacity between substations so that if there's an outage or there's maintenance work, that we have the ability to transfer that load around the city quickly. That's roughly 25 million. What's important to note here is that the costs that we've listed here are additional costs. There's ongoing work just to maintain the system on an ongoing basis that will need to continue to be funded. So pole replacements, replacement of failed equipment, et cetera. That will be ongoing work that continues. That's above and beyond the numbers that were put here.
Can I ask a question that that will be part of the context for the balance of the slides? So as you go through these measures, it's not clear to me which of them are capacity, which are reliability, which are capacity and reliability, and why. And that's a lot of what we're really interested in. So these are things we're doing, but I'm not being able to flush out what we think will be the impacts on them on our grid mod for 2 purposes. Have the capacity to electrify our city and to make sure that we have the reliability so that when we are switching customers to electricity, they're not going to regret it.
I think the slides coming up are a little bit about what's reconstruct versus what's improvements. But
Yeah,
if you
but
could
it's
use
still
that,
not-
if you
Yeah, I can weave that into the conversation, and some of the other slides do speak to it a little bit.
that's on.
But in general, the approach staff is looking at, safety, reliability, capacity in that order. So as we look at some of the aging equipment, we see continued failures or increasing rates of failures, and so there's a reliability is there. As we reconstruct that to improve reliability, we're also looking to increase capacity to plan for the future.
And, starting 1 to 2 years ago, when we were wading into this, I think it was 2 to 3 years ago, initially we had an estimate of the grid mod cost, which was an earlier first cut at it. But we and the public through the press and everyone were presented that was the cost to electrify our community. And then we subsequently came to have it clarified to us that a good portion of that was really needed because this equipment was outdated. And so it was providing multiple benefits of what portion would need to be done anyway. So what's the cost that really isn't part of the modernization for a purpose of capacity or electrification versus what we need to do with more modern equipment. And if we replace it, but we'd have to do it either way, even if we weren't trying to electrify. And those are real different dollar amounts. And we had a very strong, and it's still out there in the community, kind of a misconception of what the costs would be. And so that's why I really want to make sure as we're going through this, we're really looking at how we're framing it. What are the benefits and what would be needed? What portion of this is incremental to our increasing capacity for electrification versus what's for other reasons, or what dollars spent serves multiple reasons, purposes at the same time.
Mr. Crowley, to the extent you can frame it a little more that way, I do recall those conversations. That would be good. Director Curritor, do you have something you'd like to add at this point?
Yeah, I think we'll have Terry go through kind of the projects and we'll prepare that in mind. I think what you're really talking about in other agencies is looking at what are the obligations we have right now in terms of not only for the existing customers and new capacity. And, you know, hearing loud and clear from city council is how are we going to have these projects increase reliability and tangible means and methods that the residents and the city council can see in those investments.
And I think that, yes, because we had this big price tag with the grid mod at the beginning that was alluding to. And what we were trying to say is a lot of it we've got to spend anyway, even if we don't go for increased capacity. We would assume in so doing, we'd get increased reliability. But did you have something else you wanted to say?
No, it's along those lines.
Yeah.
Understood. So what I'll have kind of Terry go through is kind of to mention those in terms of the age, and you'll see those as kind of flowing through the presentation as well.
Next slide, please. So speak a little bit, so sub-transmission system, again, is the transmission system that surrounds the city and feeds all of the city's individual substations. When we looked at the system and did some initial system planning, we identified that under certain contingencies, when we lose a section of that line, other sections that are now sharing all the loads are becoming overloaded. So we want to mitigate those overloads so that we can actually have a dynamic system on a transmission, so that as that transmission operates, and if there is an issue or need to take a section out, it doesn't create overload. So this work is basically reliability work. It's not significantly increasing capacity, but as we go, right, we will plan forward for the capacity. But the driver for this project is reliability for the entire city. But again, at the transmission level, many customers are affected. So reliability becomes much more critical there. And this work we're trying to front load into the project and hoping to be completed with it by fiscal year 2029. Next slide, please. So conversion of 4 kV systems. So this slide here is discussing only the conversion of the distribution systems that are still running at 4 kV, upgrading them up to 12 kV. There's 2 areas in town that are basically islands. Right? So if we have some major failures with that equipment in that 4 kV system, we do not have redundancy to pick up those systems quickly. Therefore, we see this project largely as a reliability a project, so that we would have the ability to quickly restore customers if there is an equipment failure. About 2,900 customers are served in these 2 pockets. One pocket closer to East Meadow is only about 300 customers, and that will be likely largely converted before the end of this calendar year. The other portion over by Hopkins and Newell and the areas surrounding that is likely more of a 3-year timeline to complete that work.
Did you say a total of 1,900?
2,900.
2,900, so just 300 and then 2,600.
Exactly. So the other portion is a larger grouping of customers served by this legacy 4 kV system.
And the benefit of going to 12 kV is what?
So the benefit of 12 kV is 2 things. One, there's less line losses, so over time, less energy wasted. The other benefit is the rest of the city system that surrounds it is 12 kV. And so if we can intertie all of these systems, we can switch load between the 2. So if we had a failure at one station, we had a failure at one circuit, we can quickly pick it up. Right now, the 4 kV and 12 kV do not have ties. And so we're islanded in those areas. And so
they're islands because they're the only remaining 4 kVs in the city.
That is correct.
Got it. Okay.
So again, some of this equipment is legacy equipment from the 1950s, 60s, so served the city well over those 70 years, but it's time to start to plan for that replacement.
And what do we project as anticipated life of this equipment? We got 60, 70 years. I wouldn't have assumed
So
it was
generally 50 years.
50. So
But you certainly can stretch things to 70 years, but once you get to that point, you're starting to see more frequent failures.
got it.
And just to add on the reliability, when these are 12 kV systems, as Terry has mentioned, we have these interties for those systems. So if we do lose a substation and others, we've seen that, we're able to serve from an alternate source and to keep the reliability component of it. So it's the age of the system There is also some capacity, right, for 12 kV systems over because of the losses, but we're also, having less energy loss.
And have those locations by chance had longer outages in recent years because of this?
Not to my understanding, but certainly we do continue to see failures in those substations.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Since you're stopped, I was holding a question, but, the Colorado substation is where the receiving line transmission into the city,
That
right?
is correct.
The second expected line, will it also be going in there?
Yes.
Thank you.
So next slide, please. So, in addition to the 4 kV, we're looking at substation reconstruction. Again, some of the substations, the equipment, both at the Hopkins and East Meadow substations are 60 to 70 years old now. Equipment's, beyond expected life, and we are starting to see increased failures there. So we want to, from a reliability standpoint, reconstruct those substations. As we reconstruct, we will increase capacity, and that will help to support the surrounding 12 kV substations. In addition to East Meadow and Hopkins, we're looking to rebuild Adobe Creek in Colorado substation. So Colorado, while it also has 115 to 60, there's an additional 60 to 12 kV set of transformers there to serve the areas near that substation. So we'll rebuild those stations, and those are two of the other older stations in the city, built in the 70s, so not as old as Hopkins and East Meadow, but certainly showing signs of age, but also showing signs of limited capacity, especially when we start to look at electrification and other growth within the city. And so Adobe Creek in Colorado would be more of meeting the timeline for the expected life of the system, but it's more needed from a reliability or capacity standpoint.
I should have asked one other question. When you're going to the newer systems, in addition to being new and higher capacity and being compatible with the rest, are there other inherent improvements in the equipment that's happened?
Yes, so, these facilities were constructed 50s, 60s, and 70s, and so utility practices at the time were a certain set of standards, and over that time, utilities have improved. Customer expectations for reliability have increased, and therefore designs have changed. And so what we're looking to do, especially with Colorado substation, the 60 kV system, is rebuild that with modern utility practices. And then also with the substation, we will also rebuild those with modern utility practices for reliability.
And any examples of what these technical improvements are and what they provide us?
So for 60 kV system, we're looking at a breaker and a half scheme, which is basically 1.5 breakers per feeder outlet. And so you have that redundancy there. The current system, under certain situations, we lose 2 transmission feeder outlets at the 60 kV system. Under a breaker and a half scheme, we would lose 1 element at the most. And so that design improves the reliability by 2 to potentially even 4 times, just that one piece there. And then as we move into the 12 kV substations, we'll also look at, using modern equipment that has better maintenance cycles, right? Longer maintenance cycles, better design, but also looking at that redundancy to see, with modern microprocessor relays, okay, how do we flex that and actually provide the options in the future for potentially automatic isolation and restoration of the circuits, but also looking at if there's an issue with one bank transferring over automatically or transferring between substations automatically. So try to build those reliability features into it, or at least allow for that ability in the future.
So breaker and a half, just, you call that schemes, like, so if you need 2 breakers, you have a third, so you have 3 breakers instead of 2, so you have some redundancy, so just.
All right, thank you. I'm just gonna, since we're doing a back and forth here, I want to make sure and invite Councilmember Lou, because we're gonna be, just for efficiency,
Sure.
let's do it halfway through this way, let's keep going this way. But since we don't usually go this way, I want to make sure you feel comfortable also.
I had a couple of general takes, but on this topic of substation reconstruction, I think we should consider containerized local batteries for resiliency. That very well may not make sense anytime soon, given that we already committed to purchase a large purchase of a share of a battery storage facility in San Bernardino. But if in the more distant future we need to, we actually want to, or it makes sense to additionally add containerized batteries, there needs to be physical space and there needs to be some ability in the substation to potentially accept the connection. So laying out the site or thinking about what's next in addition to the current best practices would be something that I would request we consider.
Yeah, that's great. Let's try to stick with questions just so we can get some public comment in on here too before we get all of our comments. But I do have a question while we're stopped. And you may have addressed this, but I missed it. So on this reconstruction of the 4 substations, and it's like we're going to do 2 first and then 2 later. I see the time frame at the bottom that because of material will be complete between 2031 and 2034. But can we get the first chunk? When do you think that might be done? The first 2?
So we're gonna start doing the design work, the 4 system within months. That's our intent there, so we can actually get the design ready to go. But the challenge is that the large power transformer for the substation lead times in the 4 to 5 year range. We're also working right now to polish that spec so we can get that out to bid in the near order so that we can actually get into that production line. So we go through the bidding process, go through the council award process, and actually issue that PO so that we're actually established in the production line there. But it's going to take a long time for that. What our plans are is to focus in on East Meadow substation first, build that, increase that, and then get that operating as 12 kV. And that will also help to offload some of the surrounding substations. And then we would move over to Hopkins substation, rebuild that as 12 kV. Now we have 2 new 12 kV substations and new capacity there. And that will help to facilitate offloading Adobe Creek in Colorado while those are being reconstructed.
Gotcha, but we can't really even start that until 2030 because of the
lead time of the material. So we can do the design work ahead of time. We can, work with manufacturers to get in line as soon as possible, right? And maintain that place in line, but the delivery times are just extremely long.
So just a couple things on how that relates to cost and efficiency. So by going out with a larger RFP where we have several transformers coming down and we can stage those, we can also get probably some economies of scale, also get our projects higher in that queue. And then, as Terry was mentioned, by upgrading those substations, we can take the other ones offline. So you're not having a contractor working on an energized substation, which only increases cost and time and complexity. So we're able to have some cost savings there. And you'll see that frankly, in a future slide, as we talk about some of the staging of the projects, and we also keep it in mind the cost as well.
Karen, I think they were finally back to you.
All right. So let's move to the next slide. So the Colorado 115 60 kV improvement. So again, this is the one single receiving station for the city. Looking to reconstruct some of the legacy equipment there. A lot of it's built in the 70s, mid 70s, and it's time for replacement there. So this project will upgrade the site. It will expand the fence line, improve some of the site access roads around the equipment, and do other miscellaneous site improvements, lighting, security, other things like that in preparation for the reconstruction of the 60 kV bus. The break and half scheme is larger than the current scheme. The layout, the footprint for that is larger. So we have to provide additional room, and that's why we need to expand the fence. For that work, and then we'll also replace one of the 115 to 60 kV banks. It's a legacy bank that's just at the end of life, and so proactively replacing it is a reliability piece of work. For that, again, I would say that the 60 kV bus and the breakers within that bus is beyond its expected life, and that also would be a reliability piece of work, something that we would do regardless. Now, again, as we build these, we are looking for what the city's future ultimate peak demand would be, and we will size that new equipment for that. But again, the initiation of this work is really system reliability, and it being the single substation that serves the entire city, this becomes very critical.
If I may, so on this discussion of what is reliability, and you were just saying, well, we have to do that regardless, which goes into this bucket of, okay, there's an aspect of reliability that we may have some decline in our reliability because some of this is just too old of equipment. We get one step up just if we replace like with like. Then we've got that other increment, all the things you were describing of, we're not replacing like with like. We're changing capacity, we're improving compatibility, and we have a whole bunch of new, better features of either low maintenance or different performance features. And so as we talk about reliability, we need to actually talk about those subcategories. And part of why I keep returning to this is that as officials, we, and to a great extent you as well, we're not just doing the stuff because it's the right things to do and address our goals. And but it's also that we have the audience of the ratepayers, commercial and residential, who, as we're going through this big transformation, they need to continue to be on board with what we're doing. And we need an explanation and a narrative of what is this that's going on and how are they going to benefit. And so that's a big part of why I'm continuing to think about what are the different benefits and how we explain them.
Okay. And as mentioned earlier too, this is largely driven by reliability, but we're not doing a like for like. There are some improvements to try and capture current best utility practices and improve reliability by 2 to potentially up to 4 times that. And so that there are some additional costs with that. You're correct. I don't know that we would avoid those costs in rebuilding this because it doesn't really make sense to maintain the status quo when customers' expectations for reliability continue to increase. So, but taking note of that, this project, due to long lead materials, again, is gonna last for quite a while. And the need for this project, we need to finish East Meadow and Hopkins potentially first before we actually start in on a lot of the work for Colorado. So we actually have that 12 kV capacity to offload the Colorado substation, the 12 kV portion of it, to relocate those banks out of the way of the new 60 kV breaker scheme. Next slide, please. So 12 kV distribution system, this is the largest monetary portion of the work. And so this again would rebuild the entire distribution system within the residential area. Again, the grid mod project is focused on residential electrification. We're not necessarily touching commercial areas. And so the largest portion is really going through all of this area that's a remaining 12 kV overhead and underground and rebuilding that to allow for additional capacity. That's roughly the 244 million that we're estimating today. Again, that's today's dollars. That's not escalated out over the time period that it may take us to do those reconstructions. Additionally, we're looking to strengthen the 12 kV feeder ties, the physical cable that goes between the substations to increase capacity between the substations to better facilitate transferring load around the system. That helps to us restore after outages or plan for maintenance. And that's roughly 25 million for that work. So again, distributed components is transformers and wires, that portion of it. Primary focus of the work is really going to be to strengthen the feeder ties first and then replace transformers as customers start to electrify. Expect this work to really be ongoing beyond fiscal year 2034. So we expect that this design work and reconstruction of the distribution system will extend well out 10, 15, potentially even 20 years. Next slide, please. So one of the reasons that we do feel that the distribution work will extend out many years is that we want to refocus on the reliability portions, the substation portions, the transformer portions, the components of the system that actually serve more customers versus starting off with rebuilding the distribution system in through neighborhoods. This is really how we've determined it as a when and where focus. So as customers start to electrify, or as we see neighborhoods starting to electrify, we would go into those neighborhoods and upgrade that system so that those building permits and those self-improvements on the property can actually happen. We're also looking to use the smart meter data, the AMI data, to identify overloaded transformers. So where customers may have already upgraded, or where we've already seen low growth within these residential areas, and implement the grid mod upgrades in those areas. So we actually solve two problems there. One, we have overloaded transformers, so we mitigate that issue, but then we also build future capacity for future electrification. We're also working with customers to manage their EV charging rates. And some of that, what that does is help to limit the cost of the distribution reconstruction. So by working with customers to have plug sharing devices or compatible plugs that can share the same 40 amps of charging across multiple cars, we can limit the peak demand and the total build cost for grid modernization. And then we're also looking to identify what we would seem to expect as an average or expected loads for the typical home, and have grid mod fund up to that level. And then when you have a larger home or a customer that wants to have larger demands, larger solar interconnections, larger battery interconnections, a lot more EV plugs, that those customers, those property owners would pay for those incremental costs above what is identified to fund. Next slide, please.
Excuse a technical quick.
Yeah.
This is just a trivial, just a nomenclature thing that can sometimes get in the way. Back as the first 12 kV slide, I talk about the circuit ties between substations, and then later use the phrase feeder ties. Are circuit ties and feeder ties the same?
Synonymous, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought, but okay. When you use different words, I want to know if I'm supposed to attach different meanings. Thank you.
And I had two questions, one on bullet number 2, on that we're going to be able to use the AMI data to identify overload transformers. Is that because we'll be able to, within the customers on a given transformer, will be able to look at where they might have overlapping peak demand and what that is? Is that what?
Exactly. Within the same basically 15-minute window, we can look at what that transformer load is. So we look at the load on all of those customers that are connected to that transformer. And then in that 15-minute, we can look at what that peak demand is and determine whether that's above or below the nameplate rating for that.
With the AMI system, is that a pretty simple query?
It's, I wouldn't say it's simple, but it's doable, right?
Okay.
I mean, it does require engineers to review the data to make sure that are we connecting the right customers? Are the right customers connected to the right transformer? So there's some error analysis that needs to be done by a human. So it's not just basically a straightforward process, but that work can be done. The smart meter data actually presents the information to be able to do that work, whereas before it's just not available.
It's valuable and a good story.
Yeah.
And then on bullet 3, I'm excited to see this. That we'd be able to have plug sharing devices on EV charging. But I didn't follow how the 12 kV distribution improvement connected with that. What happens there?
So what we find is some customers are looking at installing EVs, chargers in their home so they can charge the obvious, right? But what we start to see is multiple EVs per home. And so, and we're trending towards that, right? So we could trend to having potentially 4 EVs in a home. You know, a couple parents have cars and a teenager have a car.
Alan's a culprit, I heard.
Alan is a culprit of this. Alan is a culprit of this. And so we get into a situation where it's like, if we had 4 level 2 EV chargers fully charged and everybody came home and, hey, it's cheap rates at 9 o'clock, let's all plug in at 9 o'clock and charge, then all of a sudden we've got.
Yeah, no, I get the problem.
Right. So some of the chargers, right, will communicate with each other and they'll limit the capacity to whatever the serving branch breaker is. So if we say you can have a 50 amp breaker, those communicating chargers will work together to limit that.
And so I get that as well as callers that and things, but what I didn't know what's our action?
So what that rolls up to is instead of supplying powers for, 4 full level EV chargers in 5 different homes on the same transformer and building, a 200 kW transformer, which we don't have, right? We can still put up a 50 kVA transformer or 75 kVA transformer, and through this managed load, better utilize the capacity of that transformer and the secondary system. So the cost for us to install the transformer and upgrade our system is less because we've managed the customer's peak demand.
Okay, and so I had been familiar with managing it at the customer site. But you're saying at the transformer, we can,
Well, it's not so much at the transformer, but in aggregate, right? We're eliminating the total sum, right,
Yeah.
of each of the individual customers by managing at the individual customer. So that peak demand that's going to be residing on that
so
transformer.
you'd manage the feed at the individual customer.
Yes, when you say you, I think of me personally, our
The city.
staff doing it.
Yeah.
So we're not necessarily we're requiring the equipment that would manage it in the home.
Okay. All right, so then I think we're on the same thing. So you're saying that in order to have the plug sharing, you would set standards that the home would have to utilize.
That is correct.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
And that rolls into the next bullet, the 4th bullet on here, where we're starting to look at, don't want to necessarily say no to a customer, but we want to encourage them to electrify in a smart way. But if they do not feel comfortable with that, or they have a legitimate need where they feel it's worthwhile, we would ask them to pay for those additional capacity increases. And that's where we get into this, what's the expected average demand for a home or necessary demand that grid mod's willing to fund versus, maybe somebody wants something in addition to it or above and beyond that. Great. Next slide, please. So this is just a general schedule to kind of outline timelines of where we're going. And then there's a sum of generally what the dollar amounts would be for these specific projects that we discussed. Again, as we discussed early on there is more work than what's shown on here for the city. So funding as we see it and as it rolls through the budgeting process the numbers will change and the numbers will potentially increase to reflect the other work, right? But we just wanted to show the schedule here. So that there's just kind of an understanding of what's going on. Again, we want to front load the sub-transmission reconductor work. We're going to start on the 4 kV substation design work, but we won't be able to get into construction until 4 or 5 years when we get the material delivered to us. Same issue with the Colorado substation. We're going to start on the design work currently, and then we're going to continue to work through that project, but there is a long project lead time due to delivery of material. Adobe Creek and the Colorado substation, we don't need to jump into those projects quite right now, but we do expect within 2 years, or basically a year and a half at this point, we're going to start to do work on those projects. But again, they will be further out due to delivery of material. 4 kV distribution system, again, for reliability reasons, we really see this as a priority to work on converting those customers over to 12 kV systems so that we can feed them from multiple locations. And then again, looking at the when and where for the 12 kV distribution upgrades, we expect that project to ramp up over time as adoption rates increase. But we do expect that to be a much, much longer period of time. And spread out over time. So rather than trying to cram all that into the first 5 years and get it done, and maybe the customers aren't utilizing those assets right now, we're looking to spread that out. And by doing that, we don't have to debt finance that work. And it's roughly about $118 million reduction in the debt financing from the previous approach.
And how much debt financing remains and how long of a term is the debt?
So we're going through the process for the debt financing right now. So some of those things are not known. The term is probably going to be a 20 or 30-year bond. The amount that we're looking, rough numbers right now, is we're looking at for a first tranche of debt financing $90 million. And so we're seeking to tentatively issue that, go through the process for approvals and issue that in the next fiscal year. And then hold on to that for the next 3 years, refine our CIP as we go through this process, and then we'll look at another refinancing or financing of debt.
And just as a reminder, the debt and the projects usually in a 3-year window of time. So that way we have different tranches. We also try to look at the amount that we're doing to make sure that it's not too small, so we don't have a lot of associated costs, administrative costs and other costs for it. And look at our rates to try to keep them low and stable, and not over finance as well.
Well, and that, the fact that you're going to go through tranches, and which complicates answering this question, but as we are communicating, what's the electrification component, the capacity and the greater reliability costing, is really a question of over what time frame. And if we're saying we're buying this equipment, it's good for 30 years and we're going to amortize it, then we really have, and the payments are stretched over that time frame, 20 or 30 years, whatever it is, then we're really having a different story in terms of what does it cost our ratepayers per year. And it's not this big scary number, or it's a big number, but it's not as scary when we really look at it spread over the life of the equipment. So.
All right, let's see if we can wrap the presentation and get the public comment.
So, next slide, please. And so these, as we did mention, or I did mention earlier this week, so we presented this to the climate working group earlier this week. These are some of the comments that came back from them. I'll run through these fairly quickly, but generally positive feedback on looking at a financial charge for capacity beyond an expected normal. Also kind of had some discussions about, well, that should go both ways. If your demand is reduced, you should have some ability to manage that cost, right? So, and see some rewards from that, as well as if it's above that, then you should see some potentially ongoing additional costs to pay for that additional demand on the system. Also, I wanted to see a little bit more communication on how we fuel up EVs at slower rates to reduce peaks, how that's beneficial. Positive comments on the flexible approach, the when and where, to adding capacity. Did cite that some of the peak demands seem to be high for homes, would like to see more data to really affirm those peak demands and how we go forward. And that's certainly staff's desire, is that we are going back and pull the AMI data as much as we can and start to really figure out, for this size home, what would be the expected peak demand, so we can refine our design and not overbuild the system and not underbuild the system, which would cause us to go back later and rebuild what we just built. So somewhat of a learning process if we go through this. Next slide, please. Also, there were some questions about, how much managed charging could impact the cost of capacity upgrades. So how does that affect the cost of the build for Gridmod? Also wanted to seek additional ways to save money on Gridmod, beyond the flexible. What are we also doing to really dive into the numbers to reduce those costs while still meeting the needs of the project? Savings focus on mixed use areas for commercial properties as owners, shared costs. So where you have mixed use, commercial and residential, how are we going in there to do the electrification, and how are the property owners sharing in those costs? Again, since the focus with the climate portion was really to electrify the residential sector and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, residential sector, we haven't gotten too deeply into the mixed use areas. Talk to planning about where growth is occurring, and so how do we really identify when and where? And so we can look at existing overloaded transformers, we can look at permits, but that's not very predictive long term. And so that's one of the tools that we're trying to find, certainly with the climate action plan. And as those customer programs are being developed, we need to monitor those quickly to see, okay, what's the participation rate, where are they going? And that's kind of another early indicator of where this work is going. And then also, as mentioned earlier, integrating batteries into future designs, allowing for future technology in our designs as we reconstruct things. So next slide, please. And this is the last slide. So just some considerations to discuss, if you want to provide feedback to us, is you'd like to see some feedback on, is there any thoughts on the approach to upgrading the 12 PV system as customers adopt, as residential customers adopt for electrification? And then also, is there some discussion about, for feelings and thoughts about, looking at designing the average demand or expected demand for a residential dwelling and funding that with grid mod, but anything above and beyond that would be at the property owner's responsibility. And with that, I've opened up to questions.
All right, well, thank you very much. Why don't we see if we have any public comment at this point?
We currently have one request to speak. Our first speaker is Stephen R.
Hopefully we can hear Dr. Rosenblum this time.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you.
And welcome.
Yeah, okay, thanks. This is a really quite exhaustive presentation. I think the first thing that residents need to understand about the electrification process is that without this, we're not going to achieve our goals, our 80 by 30 goals, our carbon neutrality goals. We have to provide enough electricity to everybody so that they can fully electrify on the time scale that we're talking about. So that's not a question of convincing them to spend the money. If we're realistically trying to meet our goals, we have to spend the money, and we have to figure out how to do it. The second thing is I'd like to talk about what Councilmember Liu brought up about batteries. I think the priority of batteries locally needs to be really brought much higher up in the planning. As I mentioned in the council meeting, there's a project going on in New Orleans where the utility helps customers install batteries in their own houses, which are under the control of the utility, so that the batteries can be charged and discharged under control of the utility. And this provides a huge reliability improvement in that when the power goes out due to the distribution system, the customer still has emergency power in their house. They don't depend on the network at all. So they perceive it as a minor reliability interruption, but they still have power. Their refrigerator is still running, their heater is still running, and having a battery someplace in Utah doesn't really help them at all. It may reduce their electric rates, but it doesn't improve reliability. So I think we need to become more self-reliant, and I think that's what reliability is about. And if we don't do this, I think we're not really trying to assure reliability. The other thing the city should do is to try and maximize the amount of solar power that it generates. This would allow them to recharge the batteries when the transmission network is down, so that hospitals, people that have oxygen machines that require electricity all the time, that they won't be without power when they need it. Thank you.
That is it. And those all our requests?
Yes, that concludes public comment on item 2.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just start by commenting that along the lines of what Dr. Rosenblum was describing, with distributed batteries and such, that not only do people, and I know Councilmember Burge mentioned several times that that has that added advantage of people feeling like they have their own resiliency and reliability capacity there, not capacity in the sense of amount, but abilities there. But there are programs that you all are probably aware of around the country. I know at least one in Colorado where the city or the utility will actually subsidize substantially with on-bill financing or otherwise batteries that a customer would install if they agree to let the city access that in times of need. And so that's even like, I think, one more step where it's resiliency as a community in a different way. Now, that may not have a great capacity, but it could get you through some. Is that something that we're also, could be looking at or analyzing, or that, did that working group bring that up?
You want me to?
Yeah, maybe Jonathan has some answers on this because it did come up in the reliability and resiliency plan.
Yeah, I think this maybe falls under the umbrella of the long-term resiliency discussions, because these programs do require staffing and they do incur costs, and so I think that's something we talk about in that context.
Yeah, okay, so we won't go into it in deeply today. I just wanted to point out that to the extent we do, we should look at the different incarnations of it, because some are getting quite creative and quite interesting and could be quite helpful. I wanted to just clarify, tie a couple things together here. So when we're going through the forecasted costs and timelines slide, and that bottom one, the grid mod 12K KV distribution upgrades, and talking about, you know, the $118 million in debt financing we can save by spreading that out as the demand is created. What I'm wondering is, you know, on the next slide where you were talking about not wanting to overbuild or underbuild, right? That's the hard part, is how do we hit it right? And are there other ways in addition to sort of that slower rollout that we can adjust as we go? Because we're obviously gonna have to see what uptake is. There's gonna be devices getting more efficient. I mean, you can see around the corners, and I'm sure we've made sophisticated projections, but we don't really know what electrification is going to look like. So how do we adjust as we go?
So I think one of the ways that we adjust as we go is we slow down. So rather than planning to build a system within 5 years, if we spread it out over 10 years, we do have that opportunity to incorporate technology as it matures and comes to market. So like vehicle to grid is one of those things that we would watch. That is, you know, to me, a changing dynamic for this design, right? If we start to incorporate vehicle to grid, everybody's got a battery instantly, right? Well, not everybody, but most people have a battery and it's mobile, right? They can move it around to wherever it's needed. And so I think that's one of the things that would be interesting to see how we go. But again, slowing down, I think, has the ability to help us think through and absorb those technologies as they come to market. You know, obviously for the utility, we want to be the backstop, right? We want to be prepared when everything else fails to be able to continue to serve electricity. So some of the capacity design that we have is, you know, there because we are that backstop for the worst day in the year, you know, the worst week of weather that we have. That's where we want to be reliable and available to the community. So some of there's a, you know, a design and risk assessment with that. Also, I think that, you know, as we go through the design process with these projects and formalize the project scope a bit more, again, these are budgetary numbers that will shift and change over time a little bit. But as we go through that design process, we can also look at cost effectiveness and cost efficiencies to move forward. And some of these numbers should refine in the downward direction.
That's great. And as we see technology evolve, we can also figure out what behavior we want to incentivize amongst our residents to increase efficiency and reduce costs and all of that. I think it's going to be fun to see how in 10 years, I mean, if this grid mod project covers 10 years, a lot's going to change. And that'll be kind of the art and the fun of it, is how do we integrate that into this plan? So that's great. Councilmember Lee, do you have anything?
Yes, a few things.
We have 7 minutes.
Okay, adding on to some of what Councilmember Burt discussed, I think an additional helpful view would be to understand the sort of impact per dollar on SAIDI, SAFE, KV. I am probably mispronouncing those again. So we understand the relative impact of these different projects. This could be ballpark sized. And I think it'd also be useful to understand which parts of these projects depend on each other. It sounds like the sort of more local 12 kV distribution updates, you can just do just in time. Others maybe have some kind of diminishing marginal return. In the sense that whenever you spend hundreds of millions of dollars, the first $10 million is going to be the most urgent, most impactful, high return. But then the last $10 million might be something that could have been deferred or phased out, like the 12 kV distribution updates. And so getting a sense of that as like out of the sense of like what depends on other things and what are the relative metric impacts of these projects, I think is at minimum a reassuring step, but also just really good talking points about the reliability benefits we get and why we're doing things in a certain order. I had a question at the working group. I just sort of threw it out there. I don't know if we'll have time to discuss this, but I'd also be curious how we could potentially save money whenever there's a very large total expense. There's usually something, right? There's like some in-house expertise, or there's some streamline of some review, or there's something that can often save over such a large project, something non-trivial. So I'm curious what we've thought or what we could think in that kind of direction.
So for some of the near term cost savings, so one of the things we're looking at with, say, the substation transformers, we're looking to bid all the substation transformers at once. And so it's a more attractive bid for the manufacturers. And so and then we would stagger the delivery time to meet what our planned construction is. It also provides, you know, some uniformity in the design, right? So we write one spec and the manufacturer builds one design. And so there's basically some cost savings there as well. So that's one piece that we think we can shave a few dollars, and we'll get some scales of economy with that. And so we'll go forward with that. I think another piece too that the city could really look in a little bit more is the difference in cost between internal staff labor, construction crews that are hired by our city employees versus contract crews. There's a big difference in cost there. And so with this phasing out and spreading out the timeline for the 12 kV distribution rebuilds, I think it gives the city an opportunity to really look at the vacant positions within the lineman department and seeing what we can do to fill those positions so that we are less reliant on the contractor crews that are a bit more expensive.
Okay.
I think I mean, those are the two things that really come to mind. I mean, obviously, we're gonna continue to engineer and find ways to improve and lower those costs.
Okay. And just on the second consideration, I'll note that the working group had a lot of discussions about different sort of rate designs, like different monthly fixed costs for different panel sizes, different other costs. I think that is definitely something that we can discuss further when we actually get to rate setting. I think that's a good way to spread the cost over time and have more predictability for residents and different sort of housing projects. So those are my comments.
One is, I was glad to hear you, Terry, bring up the vehicle to grid. And that has been projected to be potentially transformative. I don't know. How much of that is gated by the vehicle manufacturers making that capability pervasive versus that's no longer the big issue? Is that?
So I'm not an expert in an area, but I understand that there is a big dependency on the vehicle manufacturers actually allowing for that within their software, within their onboard charging systems.
I had just heard recently something that sounded like it was less dependent, and I didn't know what that was. But given the potential impact of that and how it might mitigate some of these upgrades, are we kind of modeling roughly some scenarios where we might pivot and if we're looking at how that, if we see that might be extremely impactful, do we want to give more attention to that is what I'm leading to.
So we are giving internally to engineering staff, we are having a lot of discussions about power control systems and batteries, you know, being agnostic to power flow across the meter, right? And seeing like, how do we enable customers to have that choice? And then also looking at the engineering of it and saying, okay, what's realistic with how these batteries operate and with the new technology? What can we basically develop standards and requirements to require the customer to conform to that would help lower the construction cost or the build cost for grid mod. And so we're having those discussions and trying to find that comfort level. So certainly as we roll into this on a day-to-day basis, you could see there's clearly some opportunities for batteries to do some peak shaving, right? There's clearly some opportunities for batteries to provide reliability through outages, to continue to provide power and meet those loads. What we're looking at is trying to be that foundation, that stable platform where the city stands upon for the electric needs is that, okay, after that demand period goes and you want to charge that battery, where is that energy coming from? After that long duration outage, after a week of overcast and rainy weather, like where is that energy coming from? And that's the piece where we're trying to make sure that we're still that stable platform and not
That
making risk.
recovery mode.
That recovery mode.
Demand that places on you.
And so I think that's where engineering is currently still trying to go through, okay, what is the rate of recharge of those batteries? Because at some point, they may not be recharging themselves entirely from solar, rooftop solar. And that's the question we're trying to work through right now.
All right, well, gentlemen, thank you. It's very thorough, very big project. I'm sure you'll be back, but we thank you for being here and explaining it all to us today. And with that, we'll close up that item. Thank you. Director Eggleston, next meeting.
Caught me off guard. Quick transition. Okay, our next meeting was scheduled for April 3rd. It's been moved to April 17th, same time at 2 p.m. And the couple items we have planned are an update about communications, as well as the item that was discussed a little today about climate financial strategy scoping and regulatory options that we want to explore this year.
And
That's great because those are two big things that are really going to enable a lot of the rest of the stuff. Yes.
Oh, just, is the 17th the afternoon that the Stanford Sustainable Data Center Conference is?
No, that's May 1st.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly.
Which incidentally is another,
See,
was our
that-
next
we do have a
meeting
conflict
date,
that-
and
that's
we
the-
will also need to look at rescheduling.
Okay, great. All right, well, we will do that. Thank you so much. Thanks all. Enjoy this lovely weather. We are adjourned.
That's actually a bit of a